Pliny the Younger, Book 3, Letter 5, to Mesa. I am extremely pleased that you read my uncle's books so diligently as to be desirous to procure them all, and to know exactly of what books he has been the author. I will perform the part of an index, and will also point out to you the order in which they were written. A piece of knowledge that cannot be unacceptable to the learned. When he had commanded in the army, he composed a treatise of equal spirit and correctness concerning the art of managing the javelin on horseback. Two books on the life of Pomponius Secundus, in whose affections he had always held a very particular place. And therefore these memoirs were written in gratitude to the memory of such a friend. 20 books of the wars of Germany, in which he has included all the wars we ever had with the Germans. He began this performance when he was an officer in Germany, and was admonished to it by a dream. For in his sleep he saw the figure of Drusus Nero stand before him, who, after having extended his conquests over the greatest part of Germany, died there. The apparition recommended the memory of his actions to my uncle, and entreated him to rescue his name from the injury of oblivion. Three books entitled The Men of Letters. Their bulk required them to be divided into 6 volumes, and in these he begins with the orator in his cradle, and perfects him at the bar. In his younger years, under Nero's government, he wrote 8 books concerning the doubtful figures of grammar. The slavery of those times had rendered all performances of a freer and a higher nature dangerous. One and 30 books that are a continuation of Aufidius Bassus's history. 37 books of natural history. A diffusive work, learned, and not less diversified than nature itself. You wonder how a man so constantly employed in business could write so many volumes, many of which were upon such nice subjects. And your wonder will still increase when you are told that he was a pleader for some years, and that he died at the age of 56. The rest of his time was filled up and embarrassed by those great employments which his favour with several of our emperors procured him. But he was a most piercing genius, incredibly fond of knowledge, with the closest application. He constantly began his nocturnal lucubrations at the feast of Vulcan, the 23rd of August. Not because it was an auspicious season, but because it was a proper time for study. In the summer, at the beginning of the night, but in winter, at 1 o'clock in the morning, or at least at 2, often at 12 at midnight. He made his hours of sleep perfectly convenient. Sometimes between his hours of study, and sometimes as soon as they were over. Before it was day, he waited on the Emperor Vespasian, who allotted his nights also to study. And from thence he proceeded to execute the orders he had received. Then he returned home, and again employed his spare time in study. After dinner, a meal which, according to the custom of our ancestors, he made light and easy. In the summer, if he had any leisure, he lay down in the sun whilst a book was read to him, upon which he criticized and took out particular passages. For he never read anything without making an extract of it. It being his constant saying that, quote, no book was so bad but something might be learned from it. After having thus basked himself in the sun, he commonly bathed in cold water, and then ate a little and slept less. Then, again, as if it had been a new day, he studied till supper time. And during supper a book was read, and cursory remarks made upon it. I remember when one of his friends reprimanded the person who was reading for some wrong pronunciation, and obliged him to begin again. My uncle said to his friend, "Did you understand what he read?" To which the other replied, "He did." "Why, then," rejoined my uncle, "would you force him to begin again? We have lost above 10 lines by your interruption." So parsimonious was he of his time. In summer, he rose from supper before it was dark. In winter, soon after the close of night. And this as punctually as if it had been an indispensable law. Nay, He did it amidst all his business and the hurry of the city. In the country, the time of bathing only was exempt from study. When I mention bathing, I mean the time when he was actually in the bath. For, whilst he was rubbed and wiped, he either heard something read to him, or dictated something to others. Upon a journey, released, as it were, from the cares which at other times molested him, he applied himself to this single labour only. His amanuensis, who went with him with a book and all the implements of writing, wore gloves upon his hands in winter, lest the severity of the weather should make him lose any time. And for that reason, my uncle himself, when in Rome, was always carried in a chair. I remember I was once reprimanded by him for walking. "You need not," says he, "misspend your hours in this manner." For he thought all time lost that was not employed in study. By this constant application he finished so many volumes, and left me 160 books of choice remarks, written on both sides, and in a very small hand, which makes them still more numerous. He told me that when he was governor in Spain, he might have sold those commentaries to Lartius Licinius for 40,000 sesterces. And at that time they were less voluminous. Does he not seem to you, upon knowing how much he has read, and how much he has wrote, never to have been in any public post, nor never in favour with any one of our emperors? And when you hear with what assiduity he prosecuted his studies, does he not seem neither to have read nor to have wrote enough? For what would not those employments hinder? Or what would not such application effect? I always smile, therefore, when they call me studious, who, in comparison of him, am the idlest man alive. And yet it is only when compared to him. For the services I am employed in, towards the public and towards my friends, take up all my hours. But which of those who dedicate even their whole life to literature, when compared to him, would not blush as if they had passed their time in sleep and indolence? I have run out my letter into a tedious length, though I only intended to write what you required, a list of the books my uncle left. However, I am confident that what I have told you will be as acceptable as the books themselves, because those particulars may excite you not only to read them, but may spur you up to an emulation of equalling him in some branches of his labour. Farewell.